children, spend more time tutoring their kids, checking their homework, doing things with them than they did in the 60s. I don't see how that's possible because we're also working more hours. What are we doing less of? I think we're sleeping less, although I'm very suspicious of people who say they don't sleep because your body catches up with you and makes you sleep at a certain point. We're drinking less. Alcohol consumption is much lower, but we're taking a lot of tranquilizers and Prozac and things like that. So men have definitely increased their minutes of housework per week and their minutes of childcare, but there's still like a 6-to-1 ratio between women and men. So women, yes, are getting, and that varies by education level, and race, and so a lot of different factors. But that's basically the story. Women are bearing the brunt of this increasingly hectic work-life combination.
This all sounds very pessimistic to me. The treadmill is running faster and faster. Do you ever see us reaching a point where this is unsustainable, or perhaps emotionally unsustainable in families?
Yeah, I don't know what the future is going to hold.
I'm asking you to be clairvoyant.
I don't know. Yeah, I have enough trouble trying to describe the present. I mean, a lot of things are so radically changing. Think about privacy and work-life balance there. You know, how many your faculty members have Facebook accounts? Okay. Do you accept friend requests from your students? No. Half people not yes, and half people no. Does a high school teacher accept friend requests from a minor student? Does many of the digital natives, so to speak, the folks born after the invention of the internet, don't realize that they need to have a public and a private self. So they don't want the photos of them vomiting at a party tagged because employers will see it. The potential will they won't get the job. So or is there a whole different way of living, which is that you put so much crap out there on the internet that you're in a hall of mirrors and nobody, it's maybe there's a picture of you smoking a joint or vomiting after a frat party or whatever, but it's so buried in all the all the effluvia of the internet that actually the employer doesn't ever see that, or it's not you, or you tag it with a slightly different spelling of your name. Who knows? The whole notion of privacy of a front stage, to use the sociologist Irving Goffman's term, and a backstage, the private, authentic self, is fallen by the wayside. So maybe it's not so stressful. I don't know. I find it all stressful, but I'm.
You find it stressful?
I do. Yeah, but I'm I'm a pre-internet. I'm not a digital native. I'm a digital immigrant, I guess. So for example, I went to, like many college and school do, at some point in their lives or later on, I went to Europe for a summer and backpacked, and I arrived in France. I didn't know where I was going, where I was staying. All I knew is I wanted to meet French women, and I arrived after the red eye. I was starving. I got to a French bakery, and I asked for en baguette. I practiced it so many times. Je voudrais en baguette, je voudrais en baguette. And I walk in and I say that, and they just ignore me. French are not the nicest. Parisians are not the nicest. When you bungling their language, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have Google Translate. I hardly talked to my parents. Once a week I would call to say I was alive, basically, from a cabin, public phone cabin. But my heart was beating. I said, finally, the baker screams at me. Je voudrais une baguette. It's feminine. And believe me, I never ever make that mistake again. So I had to do something on my own. I had time to. I had a lot of time alone on trains, and I didn't meet the French women, unfortunately. I spent a lot of time alone, camping out in parks and things like that. And I worry that that experience is not even possible anymore. And I think there's a social cost that I like to be an old fogey and point out. And the young folks who respond don't see any problem. Because maybe they never knew it any other way. And it is maybe easier, I don't know. So for some folks it might not feel stressful at all. But sort of living in a cusp of two social worlds, I think, pre and a post internet world. It makes me very confused, at least.
This is a kind of an interesting tale on why inequalities happen. You basically said it doesn't have anything to do with tax policy, and everyone, politics right now is a lot to talking about the sort of increasing progressive nature of tax policy. I was wondering, how are these, how does that fit into the story, or does it, or?
Tax policy? I think tax policy is largely a response. Most people study cross-national comparisons and inequality do both pre-tax and post-tax. And countries like Sweden, with a very high marginal tax rate, have both a lower pre- and post-tax inequality level. The argument being, how does it affect the pre-tax? It affects it through incentives. I guess if you're being taxed at 75 cents on that last dollar over $1 million, you're less likely to, you're going to more likely go sailing or play ball with your kid than work like a dog. So, but that's highly debated. I think most economists would agree that the forces that drive inequality in the United States are pretty global in nature. Globalization of trade, offshoring, declining unions here, immigration that brings us a lot of poor people, like a fresh stock of poor people every year. It also creates all sorts of other issues and a number of other factors, technological change. For example, the fastest growing low-wage industry is food service industry. The number one occupation for women without a college education, waitress. What does that all tell you? That tells you that there's essentially a second order effect of inequality because the lawyer mom and the lawyer dad are so busy working, they have to outsource what used to be domestic home labor. And so you find this growth in food services, for example, for the low end. And now we're seeing like a third order effect where truck drivers and nursing aides, nursing home aides and so forth, like face-to-face service kind of work can't be outsourced to India, so to speak. But the architect can, the computer programmer can, obviously the call center we all know can. So you're starting to see more and more middle class jobs being outsourced as well. So I don't know what the future is. We just basically do nothing in this country to mitigate these forces, which could be said to be good or bad. And like I said, in France, they just regulate the hell out of things to stop the trends that I'm talking about.
One of the things you mentioned that sort of intrigued me was that the wealthiest in America are working the hardest. And I don't know if anyone reads Fortune magazine, but they often have a feature of some CEO, and it's sort of it's a version of the New York Times. What do you do on Sunday morning routine, right? And every one of them gets up at 2 o'clock in the morning to read their email, does 3 hours of work on a little trainer, right? Jets to wherever they're going, comes back, works another 17 hours, and then goes to sleep for a very short amount of time. And I'm wondering how much, you would know the numbers on this, how much of that is really true and how much of that is hype trying to justify the huge salaries they're getting. Because if you add up how many hours they're actually working,
you're sleeping on the treadmill.
Some of these you laugh at and you think, did anyone edit this? And if you add it up, you wonder if there's not that many hours per day to do all of these things on a typical day. But they've seemed over the last couple of years to get increasingly, grandiose in how hard they're working. You know,